Thank you, Jacob, Rick, and the gang, and the Sacramento Sustainability Forum. It is my first as well, but this is a great asset here in Sacramento, a great resource, and I look forward to watching you guys grow. Thank you also, Renee and SMUD, for the hospitality here. We are very blessed in this region to have SMUD as our utility. Their aggressive work on behalf of renewables is actually internationally renowned, as we've talked to people both domestically and internationally, and they have a great reputation for the work they do. And so thank you, SMUD. And SMUD is partly the reason that many companies in this area are in business, because of their support for emerging renewable projects. My company in particular is actually in dialogue with SMUD about a project, so we're very fortunate. I also was thinking this morning about, in terms of sustainability, you know, we're really doing this to live in a better world, but also for people who are coming. And I have some children who asked me as I was getting ready this morning, since we're in a startup company, I'm oftentimes in jeans and a t-shirt as I head into the office, and they looked at me and said, "Daddy, why are you putting on a coat?" I said, "Oh, tonight I'm talking to the Sacramento Sustainability Forum. It's very important." They said, "Well, what's that?" I got a chance to talk a little bit about the environment. They made me change. They said, "You have to wear green, Dad." Okay, all right. Now, I have 4 daughters, and so I live with 5 females, so I get told to change a lot. So, anyway.
They did a nice job with your tie.
Oh, yeah, thank you. They did pick it out, actually. There was a bit of an argument about it. I left the room. You guys worked this out. I have 4 brothers and a sister. We just used to slug it out, so it's a very different world than I lived with. Anyway, let's talk about my family some more. What was this about it? So I was going to actually speak with a German accent, since we didn't get to. I won't do that, but I'm going to talk about perspective. So the perspective we have on the world around us can be very impacted by how we approach things. So pull up the next 2 pictures, one more. So if you were to look at these pictures up on the screen, hopefully you're not looking at them too recently after having eaten. Not very pleasant. And when most people look at those pictures, I get rather unpleasant responses. And if you could switch to the next one. Or many people just see garbage. And when we look at this particular image, what is our perspective of that? Oftentimes what we see is a world headed in the wrong direction, a dying, dirty world. And so that inevitably leads to the following, which is, that's intentionally a black screen, which is sort of doomsday, right? And that is a perspective that we don't share at my company, and I think by virtue of many of you being here, you don't share either. When we look at this particular picture, what we see is green energy. What is represented in waste for many people, we view as a very valuable resource. And so my company is Clean World Partners, and simply put, our company's approach is we leverage waste to create renewable energy and other byproducts for the sustainability era. And again, I think I'm speaking to the choir here. We are really at the forefront of an era that we embrace as a sustainability era. When we look at resources that typically were viewed as harmful or bad or taking us in the wrong direction, we view them as extremely valuable and with the ability to turn things in a very positive direction. So currently, let's talk a little bit more specifically within that sort of broad category about what we do. So every year in California, there are 15 million tons of compostable materials that are sent to the landfill. And they're composted, or they're used for what's called alternative daily cover on top of landfills, or they're just simply sent to the landfill. The challenge with that is that material, the emissions from that material are 72 times more harmful than automobile emissions. And most people, that's a difficult number to sort of comprehend, because we're very carbon focused. But the methane emissions from organic matter are 72 times more harmful than carbon emissions. And most people immediately at that point, when we bring this point up, defer to the cows, and everybody's been down Harris Ranch and you've smelled, you know, or been on I-5, you smell Harris Ranch. Those emissions, the bovine and swine emissions, are responsible for only 10% of the methane emissions. All of the organic matter in terms of green waste and food waste, etc., that is the bad stuff, ultimately, that has an immediate and harmful impact on the environment. In fact, carbon has about a 100-year lifespan in which time it does its damage. Methane has about a 12-year lifespan. In fact, commonly, Larry's probably looking at me at that 72 times number, because commonly among regulators, you'll hear the figure of 23. And I want to clarify that we use 72 figure because when you look at the 10-year life of carbon emissions in the environment and methane emissions in the environment, because methane burns so quickly and heats up the environment so quickly, it does its damage almost immediately. And if you want to have an impact on greenhouse gas emissions, you're going to have a much bigger impact taking particles of methane out of the environment than you would carbon over the short life. So, California regulators have actually, are very conscious of this particular challenge. And in fact, there are regulations that are working towards taking organics out of the landfill. And that's a world we'd like to see. It exists in Europe. Europe, however, a lot of people like to talk about how much greener Europe is. Germany did have a huge advantage with companies getting a feed-in tariff. I'm very conscious of what that is. What it means is a set price that I get paid for my renewable energy over a lifespan that the capital markets are willing to fund my projects. If I had that type of certainty, it would benefit my project. So another compliment to SMUD, they just instituted a feed-in tariff program. This is the, you know, SMUD love in up here. I'm a big fan. So, but we are working towards that here in the U.S., which is to take organics out of the landfill. And so how are we going to do that? Anaerobic digestion. Now I want to point out that anaerobic digestion ultimately is a form of compost. It's controlled compost that captures the emissions. So composting, like at your home, you are releasing the methane emissions into the environment most likely. But this type of composting is much better for the environment because we're actually taking the harmful gas out, but leaving the nutrient-rich compost as one of the byproducts that can still be used. So that's organic fertilizer that, for which there's a substantial market at the moment. And so just a little bit about, you can hit the button one more time. Ultimately, I like to point out that anaerobic digestion, ultimately, in case you don't know what it is, it's just like the human stomach. You take in food, there's acidic bacteria in a tank that breaks it down, captures the gas, and there's some other byproducts. We won't get into the full comparison. But there is, with anaerobic digestion, useful byproducts and 100% capture of the emissions. And when I'm trying to explain this to my children, for example, we pop in the opening scene of Back to the Future 2, where Doc Brown puts the beer and the banana peel into the flux capacitor to power his car. That is a world that we may live in. And so that's how I explain it to my children, and ultimately that's what it is. It's leveraging the value that is in organic matter. So just quickly on the benefits of anaerobic digestion, it creates renewable energy, as I said, fertilizer and soil additives, and it lays the foundation for additional byproducts. There is an innovative company in West Sac, started by a bunch of young UC Davis students called Micromidas. If you haven't heard of them, they're taking the fatty acids out of this process and turning it into plastic. So, not petroleum. This is actually bacteria-produced plastic, which is a very neat concept, and our company is in an emerging partnership with them to try to accomplish that. Secondly, it reduces waste volume and mass and increases landfill diversion rates. Since the institution of AB 939 in 1989, which was our original waste diversion bill that created all of the recycling programs that we all participate in, we've pulled out a substantial amount of the recycled matter. And if you were to then attack organics next out of the landfill, because it's so dense, you could have a substantial impact on landfill reduction. then it improves cost efficiencies for waste creators and handlers. Our approach to this is we're not waiting around for handouts. There is actually a market-based solution that will work to accomplish this. And then lastly, from an environmental quality and public health standpoint, you really can't argue. It reduces the odors, it reduces the emissions, the volatile organic compounds, it destroys pathogens in the waste, and so the fertilizers in the back end are acceptable for food production. And it's ultimately been adopted by many environmentalists and regulators as a climate action tool. So here's another thing, 1 second before you move. Yeah, no, that's fine. The other thing I want to point out, and this is important, is organics and this type of waste conversion really are a unique opportunity for Sacramento. Julie is going to speak in a moment about the Mayor's Greenwise initiative, which is to try to create economic development around green jobs and innovation here in this market. Well, I am, unfortunately, probably a little bit more myopic than I should be, but I look at organics as the key platform for achieving that dream here in Sacramento. And I'd like to point out that I believe that Sacramento is poised to have an international leadership position in this particular arena. And I'd like to point out the 5 keys, I believe, are reasons why that are unique to this region. Embrace what we've got here. And number 1 is UC Davis. UC Davis is recognized globally for its work in bioenergy and bioenergy research, and we need to continue to leverage that. The particular technology that my company licenses was invented at UC Davis by a woman named Dr. Reihong Zhang, who is recognized for her work. Larry Buckle is here. His company licenses technology out of Utah State as well. The work going on in the U.S. in this arena is very aggressive and proactive. Secondly, we have one of the richest and most prolific agricultural regions in the world. And one thing that I enjoy about being a resident here is in terms of, I love food, and in terms of, you go to restaurants in Sacramento, you have, the freshest produce and meats and vegetables if you're a meat eater. I apologize, probably a lot aren't in here. I grew up in an Irish household. It was meat every night. I can't get away from it. So that creates an abundant amount of organics in the region. There's also, as a part of that, a high concentration of food processors, among the highest concentration in the world as a byproduct of that. We also are sitting at the seat of the state capital of California, and California has among the most aggressive environmental legislation there is. And this is probably to the chagrin of some states, but one of our greatest exports in California is regulation. We pass something and then oftentimes other states follow. So from a business person standpoint, the advantage of that is if you can make it work here, then market opportunities will open up across the U.S., which is what we're anticipating as well. And in fact, California's landmark greenhouse gas emissions reduction bill has been introduced in Congress and has been in debate in Congress to be a national standard. I do want to put in a quick plug. AB 32 is on the ballot for repeal in November, and I will speak selfishly as a business person. AB 32 has absolutely promoted innovation and has promoted the direction of capital dollars and investment into California that would not be considered otherwise. And it's interesting because some will refer to it as a job killer, and it is absolutely a job creator. And the good news is it's a job creator of the best kind. I don't necessarily need the Richmond oil refinery to be bigger and have more jobs down there, although they are expanding. But this creates clean, innovative jobs, and so please spread the word, protect AB 32. My quick plug.
It's coming up as Prop 23 actually, which is a reverse of the AB 32.
Oh.
Prop 23.